somewhat of a sensitive topic of the idea of free will, since it does obviously feel like we do have free will, that we are the authors of our thoughts and actions. But I'd like to begin with a scenario for you. Let's say you're camping out in the woods, and as you emerge out in the tent, you are greeted by a grizzly bear who is hungry and wants to attack you. And now let's freeze frame that scenario and replace that bear with a man with an axe. And let's say in this scenario that in both scenarios you come out alive, but you lose a hand in the process. What's the difference of mental states that we're talking about here? In the situation of the grizzly bear, you're not going to feel any hatred or remorse towards this grizzly bear. That doesn't make any sense. The grizzly bear could only have done what it could have done. But if you take the situation with the man with the axe, you come out alive, but you lost a hand, you will be feeling extreme emotions and feelings of hatred and vengeance, and you might be conjuring fantasies of this man's death. Upon his trial, there's the emotions of hatred towards this person. And if the justice doesn't come to him in the most proper way that you see fit, you could live a life of total regret. And back to the scenario of the bear, let's say the park ranger captures this bear. You might even go as far as to visit this bear in captivity and show your friends, like, that's the bear that took my hand, or I guess this hand if you lost this. But if you look, but with the scenario with the man with the axe, this scenario doesn't make any sense. Now, which state of mind would you rather be in here? And this is really the heart of the topic, is the topic of free will. Could you have done differently than otherwise, or is there other sorts of causation? To say that there's free will means that you could have done otherwise. You didn't pick your parents. You didn't pick when you were born. You didn't pick what your genetic makeup would be. You're not shaping the microstructure of your brain at all. So, you're not even authoring your thoughts. Thoughts just arise in consciousness. I'm talking to you right now about this idea of free will, but even as I'm speaking, you're sort of struggling to follow along because there's competition going on in your head. You're having other thoughts that might not even have anything to do with what I'm saying. Haven't you noticed? Like, I could be here talking about free will, and in your head you could be thinking something like, I should probably stop drinking so much diet soda. Or I wonder what those cookies might taste like, or something like that. So where are these thoughts coming from? You're obviously not authoring them. And if you're not authoring your thoughts and they just arise in consciousness, then, how can we say that we have free will? And even though, and let's take a typical run-of-the-mill, serial killer. If, let's say, that person with the axe, we find out later in his in trial that with the brain screen that he had a tumor the size of a walnut in his prefrontal cortex that regulates, his feelings of impulse and fight or flight. What we would see here is a completely different scenario here. Like, was this man really in charge of his actions? And let's say, the tumor was removed and everything, was fixed, which has been the account of many scenarios in the past. This is a man who was a victim of biology. He was not a man of free will. But because of the complexity of our microstructure, we have to admit that these serial killers and these people who commit atrocities are profoundly unlucky. I mean, as technology gets better and we can find and map the neural mappings of your mind, we could find, we could easily see how this man's genetic makeup, how this man's past, how unlucky his upbringing was, who his parents were, shaped the mind of a serial killer. In other words, he could not act in any other different way. For example, if you were to exchange places with that man with the axe, atom for atom, grew up in the same manner, was given his genetics, given that temperament in that time and place, you would be him. There is no extra part of you that could do any differently. And which kind of brings me to my next point of why this matters. So is this sort of, it's fun to talk about something like this, but it's kind of, a lot of people see this as, well, this is kind of like the origins of life, kind of It's, okay, do we have free will? Do we not have free will? Where do we come from? Who cares? I'm still going to live my life. But I think this does matter, because the fact that this is really the antidote for hatred and arrogance. Because if you, let's take someone like Uday Hussein, Saddam Hussein's son. Well, you have to admit that that is extremely unlucky. And luck obviously has a lot to do with morality. To kind of give you an example of who Uday Hussein was, he and his thugs would usually go to weddings in Baghdad and rape and torture the bride right on site. He did this more than once. But it's not surprising to see that, if we take the 5-year-old Uday Hussein, we could obviously see what led up to the circumstances that would led him to be who he was to be. Now, I'm not saying that we should let all prisoners out or, grant them on the basis of, insanity or something like that. I still think that we should still lock them up and be morally justified to, because that's all we can do. There's no, we don't have, it's just better for the safety of society. But to punish them and hate them because they deserve it, that makes no sense. I mean, if you think about it, we would lock up earthquakes, hurricanes, and cancer if we could as well. But that doesn't matter. And if you think about public policy and how we implement it in any country, or especially here in the United States, how different would our reaction to 9/11 be if it was done by an earthquake? Or how irrationally would we act if Hurricane Katrina was a terrorist attack? We are still facing the consequences 15 years later from the consequences of 9/11. Over the loss of 3,000 lives. And I'm not trying to downplay the insignificance of this, but we need to really take this into consideration during our most dispassionate moments of public policy. Now, I know this might, seem, to take away from something. This is why it's one of the most uncomfortable things to talk about. And I think that has to do why does anything matter? Why, if I can't take have responsibility for my accomplishments or be held accountable for my faults, then why any of this? Well, the thing is, I think it's a very freeing mindset, because think of it like this. It really shows that we are connected to each other, that we are connected to history, and we're connected to the world. That even though you can't take credit for your talents, it's important that you still use them. Just as much as you can't take responsibility for your faults, it's important that you still try to correct them. So feelings of shame and guilt and pride don't really make any sense. But if you think about it, those emotions weren't really any fun to begin with. Those are self-isolating emotions. But compassion and freedom and the willingness to create an environment that allows us to live in each other's happiness as opposed to each other's suffering makes more sense. And I think if we take another look of the idea of a deterministic worldview, just as the physical world is a deterministic view and we're no different, then I think we could accomplish creating better policy. And if you would like to hear more about this kind of thing, the author Sam Harris wrote an excellent book called Free Will, as well as given a bunch of free lectures on YouTube on the topic, and I think it's definitely worth looking into.